The air in Asterion Hub tasted like recycled oxygen ozone, and the distinct metallic tang of regret. It was a flavor Mason Grant knew well, one that settled in the back of the throat and refused to leave, much like the memories of the war that had supposedly ended 3 years ago. Mason adjusted the strap of his worn duffel bag, his knuckles white against the fabric. Beside him, Juno skipped over a seam in the deck, plating her small boots, making a hollow thud against the metal. She was 6 years old, small for her age, with hair that refused to stay in a braid, and eyes that still found wonder in the grime of a refugee station. "Dad," she said, tugging on his sleeve. "Are we going to see the cat lady now?" Mason sighed the sound, lost in the low, thrumming vibration of the station's life support systems. It is not a cat lady Junebug. It is a civil integration officer at the Accord pairing desk. And yes, we are going there now, because if we do not, the Port Authority will revoke our residency permit and send us back to a transport ship. "But does she have ears?" Juno asked, undeterred by the threat of deportation. "I do not know," Mason muttered, scanning the crowd. "Probably." The concourse was a crush of biology and machinery. Species from a dozen systems jostled for space trading credits, for synthetic noodles, or illicit engine parts. High above the vaulted ceiling of the hub, flickered with a holographic sky that was currently malfunctioning, showing a blue summer day, interrupted by jagged bursts of static rain. Mason moved through the crowd with the unconscious precision of a man who had spent a lifetime anticipating an ambush. He kept Juno on his left, his body angled to shield her, his eyes cataloging threats. 2 security drones hovering near a noodle stall, a heavy loader mech moving too fast in the pedestrian lane, a figure in a hooded cloak near the ventilation shafts. He was not here for romance. He was not here for integration. He was here for Praetor Sarn Halvek. The name burned in his mind hot and corrosive. Halvek, the architect of the siege of Kiros, was currently sitting in a high-security suite on the upper levels, awaiting a hearing that was meant to be a diplomatic formality. Mason had other plans. He had a weapon disassembled and hidden inside a child's toy in his luggage, and he had a plan to close the ledger on the war crimes that the galaxy seemed so eager to forget. But first, he had to survive the bureaucracy. The Accord pairing desk was tucked into an alcove in Sector 4, beneath a flickering neon sign that buzzed like a trapped insect. The queue was mercifully short, populated mostly by nervous refugees and bored station workers looking for a tax break. The desk itself was an imposing slab of black polymer integrated into the station's bulkhead. Behind it sat the officer. She was Faliri. Mason had fought Faliri mercenaries on the Outer Rim, but he had never seen one quite like her. She was slumped over the counter, her chin resting in her palm, looking at a data pad with an expression of profound boredom. Her hair was a shock of white, barely concealing the pair of triangular tufted ears that twitched independently of each other. A long, slender tail covered in the same white fur swished lazily back and forth behind her chair, occasionally tapping against the metal leg of the desk. "Next," she said without looking up. Her voice was melodic but sharp, like a violin string pulled too tight. Mason stepped forward, pulling Juno with him. He slapped his identification chip onto the scanner. The Faliri officer finally looked up. Her eyes were gold with vertical slit pupils that expanded and contracted as she assessed him. She did not look at the screen. She looked at his boots, scuffed and reinforced. She looked at the way he stood weight, balanced on the balls of his feet. She looked at the dark circles under his eyes that no amount of sleep could erase. Mason Grant, she read from the screen, though she was still looking at his face. Veteran, single dad, sleep-deprived, the classic tragedy package. Mason stiffened. "I am just here for the stamp, officer. Scan the file, verify I am not a threat to civil order, and let me go." The officer leaned back, her chair creaking. "My name is Astra Nael, and unfortunately, Mr. Grant, the Accord requires a compatibility assessment for all single parents seeking permanent residency. We need to ensure you are emotionally stable enough to raise a child in a multi-species environment without causing a diplomatic incident. I am stable, Mason said through gritted teeth. You are grinding your molars, Astra observed. She tapped a long, manicured claw on the desk. And your cortisol levels are reading high enough to power a small shuttle. But fine, let us get it over with. She gestured to a large, intricate device embedded in the wall behind her. It looked less like a computer and more like a relic from a forgotten age. It was a loom, a piece of precursor technology that the station was built around. No one knew exactly how it worked, only that it could weave probability and psychology into a predictive model. It was the reason the Accord pairing desk existed, to keep the ancient machine dormant by feeding it the one thing it seemed to crave connection. Place your hand on the panel, Astra said, typing a command into her console. Look into the sensor. Think happy thoughts. Or given your profile, just try not to think about strangling anyone for 10 seconds. Mason exhaled slowly. He picked up Juno and set her on the edge of the counter, then placed his large, scarred hand onto the cold glass of the loom's interface. The machine hummed. It was not a mechanical sound, but a vibration that Mason felt in his teeth. Lights danced beneath his palm, blues, purples, and deep, violent reds. Astra watched the readout on her screen, her tail still swishing rhythmically. Processing biological resonance confirmed. Emotional baseline chaotic but functional. Searching for compatibility match within the station database. Mason checked the time on the wall clock. The hearing for Sarn Halvek was scheduled for 2 days from now. He needed to scout the security perimeter of the upper levels tonight. Every second he wasted here was a second. Halvek breathed free air. Done, Astra said, her eyebrows shooting up. That was fast. A holographic projection materialized in the air between them. It was a compatibility score glowing in bright, cheerful gold numbers. Perfect mate, 99.9%. Mason stared at the number. He looked at Astra. She was staring at the number too, her mouth slightly open, revealing sharp canines. 99.9%, Mason repeated, his voice flat. Who is the match? Astra blinked, her golden eyes widening. She tapped the screen, frowning. It is me. Silence descended on the little alcove. Even Juno stopped swinging her legs. Mason looked at the Foxgirl Matchmaker, the alien ears, the tail, the claws, the attitude that suggested she would rather be napping in a sunbeam than dealing with him. Then he looked back at the machine. Okay, Mason said, a dry, humorless chuckle escaping his throat. So, with a score like that, does that mean I get free coffee? The moment the words left his lips, the kiosk purred. It was a soft sound at first, like a cat pleased with a treat. Then the sound deepened. The vibration under Mason's hand spiked, turning from a hum into a tremor. Oh, Astra whispered. Her ears flattened against her skull. What did you do? Mason pulled his hand back, but the panel seemed to stick to his skin for a fraction of a second too long, like a magnet. I did not do anything. Astra's fingers flew across her keyboard. The loom is reacting to the query. It liked the joke, or it hated it. I cannot tell. The purr became a roar. Above them, the flickering holographic sky turned a deep blood red. The pleasant ambient noise of the station cut out, replaced by a deafening oscillating siren that sounded less like a machine and more like a dying whale. Warning, the station's automated voice boomed, shaking the deck plates. Localized reality destabilization detected. Sector 4 is now under quarantine. Repeat, Sector 4 is now under quarantine. Massive blast doors slammed down at either end of the corridor, sealing them in. The people in the queue screamed and scrambled back, pressing themselves against the closed shops, looking around as if the air itself was about to catch fire. Mason grabbed Juno, pulling her off the counter and tucking her against his chest. His hand went instinctively to the small of his back, where a sidearm would have been if he hadn't checked his weapons. He spun around, assessing the exits. Sealed. Vents too small for an adult. "What is happening?" he barked at Astra. Astra was standing on top of her chair, now peering over the console at the frantic readout. "Bond potential station level destabilization," she read, her voice trembling slightly. "Great. Just great. Dating you is apparently equivalent to pulling the pin on a grenade." "I am not dating you," Mason shouted over the siren. "Tell that to the ancient supercomputer that controls the life support," Astra yelled back. Suddenly, the blast door at the far end of the corridor hissed and cracked open. A squad of station security officers stormed through, clad in heavy riot gear, weapons raised. Leading them was a man Mason recognized from the briefing dossiers he had memorized, Warden Brask. Brask was a slab of a man with a cybernetic jaw and eyes that looked like they had seen the heat death of the universe and found it boring. "Down!" Brask roared, his voice amplified by his helmet speakers. "Everyone on the ground, now!" Mason did not get on the ground. He dropped to one knee, keeping his body between the rifles and his daughter. He raised his empty hands, fingers spread. "Civilian!" he shouted, projecting his voice with the authority of a commander. "I have a child here, lower your weapons." Brask signaled his team to hold fire, but they kept their aim steady. He marched toward the kiosk, his heavy boots clanking ominously. "Niella!" Brask barked, glaring at the Foxgirl Matchmaker. "Report! Why is my station screaming? Did you try to plug the toaster into the loom again?" "I wish it was the toaster," Astra said, hopping down from her chair, but keeping her hands visible. She pointed a clawed finger at Mason. "It is him and me. The loom thinks we are functionally necessary." Brask turned his cold gaze to Mason. "You. Name." "Grant." Mason set his eyes, locking with the warden's. "I just arrived. I put my hand on the scanner and the station had a panic attack." Brask looked at the loom, which was currently pulsing with a rhythmic, hypnotic red light. "The loom does not have panic attacks, Grant. It has prophecies." Mason felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He was supposed to be invisible. He was supposed to be a gray man, a forgettable refugee, until the moment he put a bullet in Sarn Halvek's chest. Now, he was the center of a security incident. He could feel his plan crumbling like dry sand. Halvek. He thought the name a mantra. "Do not let them detain you. Do not let them check your luggage. Focus." Astra was watching him again. She saw the shift in his posture, the way his muscles coiled. She saw the soldier overwrite the father. "Look at the screen, Warden," Astra said quickly, trying to divert attention. "The readout says the subjects, that is us, are unaware of the catalyst potential. If you arrest him, the loom interprets it as a severing of a necessary bond. Look at the structural integrity graph." She pointed to a monitor. A line graph was plummeting toward zero. "If you separate us," Astra said, "the station interprets it as an emotional rejection and turns off the gravity, or the oxygen, or both." "That is ridiculous," Brask spat. "It is a matchmaking machine, not a god." "It is a reality anchor masked as a dating service," a new voice interjected. A man in a pristine white lab coat pushed through the line of security guards. He was tall, thin, and wore spectacles that magnified his eyes to comical proportions. This was Dr. Selwyn Rook, the foremost expert on xenobiology and the loom's mysterious architecture. "Dr. Rook," Brask groaned. "Go away." "I cannot," Dr. Rook said, breathless. He hurried to the console and adjusted his glasses. "Fascinating. The loom has detected a resonant frequency between a human and a Foxgirl that matches the station's original harmonic key. It is not just predicting romance, Warden. It is predicting that their union, or lack thereof, will dictate the stability of the local quantum field." Dr. Rook turned to Mason, staring at him as if he were a rare specimen in a jar. "Sir, are you aware that your emotional suppression is currently creating a feedback loop in the sub-ether?" I am just trying to buy my daughter dinner, Mason said, his patience fraying. Is that a real tale? Juno asked suddenly. The question cut through the tension like a knife. The security guards lowered their rifles a fraction of an inch. Dr. Rook blinked. Warden Brask sighed, the sound mechanical through his jaw. Astra looked down at the little girl. The hardness in her golden eyes softened just for a second. She leaned over the counter, disregarding the guns pointed at her. It is real, Astra said solemnly. Can I pull it? Juno asked. Absolutely not, Astra said. But if you get your dad to stop looking like he is about to snap the warden's neck, I might let you see how it puffs up when I am scared. I am not going to snap his neck, Mason lied. The loom disagrees, Dr. Rook noted, pointing at the screen. It says, aggression levels critical. Recommendation de-escalation through forced socialization. Forced socialization, Brask asked. The loom chimed a bright, happy sound that clashed horribly with the red emergency lights. A ticket printed out of the slot where Mason had scanned his hand. Astra snatched the ticket and read it aloud. Mandatory action, first date verification. Location, the Free Nebula Cafe. Duration, minimum 1 hour. Objective, establish emotional baseline or face station-wide quarantine. She looked up at Mason, her expression a mix of amusement and horror. Congratulations, Mr. Grant. You got your wish. You are getting coffee. And if we do not drink it, the station kills everyone. Mason stared at her. You have got to be kidding me. Does the loom joke? Astra asked Dr. Rook. Never, the doctor replied gravely. Last time someone refused a directive, the sanitation systems reversed flow for 3 days. It was unpleasant. Mason ran a hand over his face. He was trapped. If he refused, the station locked down, and he would never get to Halbeck. If he fought, he would be arrested and Juno would be taken into care. His only option, his only tactical avenue, was to go on a date with the Catwoman, who looked like she could dismantle him with her words alone. He needed freedom of movement. He needed to get to the cafe, pretend to be a functioning human being, satisfy the machine, and then disappear into the station's underbelly to finish his mission. Fine, Mason said, his voice dropping to a growl. We go to the cafe, but I am not paying. Astra scoffed, grabbing a sleek jacket from the back of her chair and swinging it over her shoulders. Of course not. You are 99.9% perfect. I expect you to be cheap. She vaulted over the counter, landing silently on her feet. She stood a head shorter than him, but her presence was large. She smelled of cinnamon and static electricity. Astra looked at Brask. Warden, we are complying with the loom's directive. Kindly stop pointing guns at my date. It ruins the mood. Brask holstered his weapon, though his eyes remained suspicious. Fine, but I am sending an escort, 2 guards, and I am watching the feeds. If you try anything, Grant, anything that looks like you are not falling in love, I will throw you out an airlock. Understood, Mason said. Astra stepped up beside him. For a moment, her tail brushed against his hand. He flinched, pulling away. Relax, Astra whispered low enough that only he could hear. I know you have an agenda, soldier. I can see it in your walk. You are hunting something. Mason looked down at her, his eyes cold. I am just a father. And I am just a receptionist, Astra replied, her golden eyes flashing. But neither of us believes that. We will go to the cafe. We will drink the sludge they call coffee. We will make the machine happy. And then you are going to tell me who you really are before you get us both killed. She turned to Juno and offered a hand. The claws were retracted. Come on, little one. Let us go watch your dad try to be charming. It should be hilarious. Juno took her hand, grinning. Mason watched them for a second, the weight of the past 3 years pressing down on his shoulders. He adjusted his bag, feeling the reassuring hardness of the toy robot that held the firing mechanism of a sniper rifle. Let's move, Mason said. As they walked away from the desk, flanked by security guards like prisoners of war, the red lights on the ceiling faded to a soft, romantic amber. The siren cut off, replaced by a smooth jazz track, playing over the public address system. Back at the desk, unnoticed by anyone but the blinking cursor on the screen, the loom updated its status log. The Free Nebula Cafe was usually a sanctuary for the weary travelers of Asterian Hub, a place that smelled of roasted beans and quiet desperation. Today, however, it looked less like a coffee shop and more like a high-stakes hostage negotiation that had been catered by a barista with a very dry sense of humor. A perimeter of yellow holographic tape cordoned off the entrance. Beyond that, a ring of heavily armored station security guards stood at parade rest, their pulse rifles humming with a low, menacing charge. In the center of this armed circle sat a single, wobbly metal table. Kelp the barista leaned over the counter. Kelp was a species that defied easy classification, mostly resembling a sentient bundle of dried seaweed wrapped in a stained apron. He looked at the two customers being marched toward his register by the station warden. "Welcome to the Free Nebula," Kelp said, his voice sounding like dry leaves skittering over pavement. "Do you two want cappuccinos, or do you want to cause the structural collapse of the entire station? The menu is limited today." Mason Grant did not find this amusing. He felt the cold, biting metal of the kinetic dampener cuff on his left wrist. The other end of the wireless tether was synced to the wrist of the fiery woman walking beside him. They were not physically chained together, but if they moved more than 5 feet apart, the cuffs would deliver a shock strong enough to drop a draft horse. "Coffee," Mason grunted. "Black. Strong enough to strip paint." "And a saucer of warm milk for the lady," Kelp asked, blinking 3 of his 6 eyes. Astra Niel slammed her hand down on the counter. Her claws were retracted, but the sound was still like a gunshot in the tense silence. "I will have a double shot espresso with a pump of synthetic caramel. And if you make one more cat joke, Kelp, I will reconfigure your scheduling algorithm to give you nothing but graveyard shifts for the next 6 months." Kelp raised 2 appendages in surrender. "Espresso and paint stripper, coming right up." Warden Brask shoved a chair out with his boot. "Sit," Mason sat. He kept his back to the wall, or at least he tried to, but the table was in the center of the room. He felt exposed. Every tactical instinct he had honed over 20 years of warfare was screaming at him to find cover, to secure an exit, to neutralize the threats. Instead, he was forced to sit across from a matchmaker with twitching ears, while his 6-year-old daughter sat between them, treating the lockdown like a bizarre picnic. Juno climbed onto her chair, her legs swinging. She looked at the ring of guards, then at her father, and finally at Astra. "Are you two in love yet?" Juno asked, grabbing a packet of sugar and shaking it. "No," Mason and Astra said in unison. "Work in progress," Warden Brask muttered, standing just outside the immediate circle of the table, his arms crossed over his chest. He tapped a command into his datapad, and a small floating drone descended from the ceiling, hovering at eye level between Mason and Astra. The drone had a single red lens that glowed with the unblinking judgment of the loom system. "This is ridiculous," Mason hissed, leaning in. "We are surrounded by an armed platoon. I am wearing a shock cuff, and I have a sniper scope in my luggage that I need to assemble before—" He caught himself glancing at Juno. "Before I get settled." "You are charming when you are panicked," Astra said, resting her chin on her hand. Her tail curled around the leg of her chair, a nervous habit she was trying to suppress. "Just play the game, Grant. The loom needs data. It needs to believe we are building a stable emotional bridge. If we do not convince it, the magnetic containment field on the fusion reactor fails. Boom. No more vengeance for you. No more milk for me." "I do not drink milk," Astra added quickly, narrowing her eyes. Mason scoffed. "So, what do we do? Stare into each other's eyes until the station stops shaking?" "We talk," Astra said. "Like normal people. Do you remember how to be a normal person, Mason? Or did the war burn that out of you too?" The question was sharp, but her voice lacked malice. It was probing. She was doing her job. I remember, Mason said tightly. I am a father. That is normal. Is it? Astra challenged. You dragged a child to a refugee hub known for black market tech and unstable politics. That is not a vacation. That is a mission. Before Mason could retort, the drone between them chirped. A holographic projection flared to life above the table, displaying text in the stark utilitarian font of the Accord administration. Query 1. Define your primary emotional driver. It is starting, Astra said, sitting up straighter. Answer honestly. The loom reads galvanic skin response and pupil dilation. If you lie, it registers as dissonance. Dissonance means earthquakes. Great, Mason muttered. My primary emotional driver is caffeine deprivation. The lights in the cafe flickered ominously. The coffee machine behind the counter let out a screech of steam. Do not test it, Astra hissed her ears, flattening against her white hair. Be serious, Mason looked at the red eye of the drone. He looked at Juno, who was now building a small tower out of sugar packets, oblivious to the fact that her father was a hair's breadth away from a violent breakdown. Survival, Mason said, his voice rough. My driver is survival, keeping my unit alive, keeping her alive. He nodded toward Juno. The drone beeped. Acceptable. And you? Mason asked Astra, deflecting the focus. Astra hesitated. Her golden eyes darted to the side. Order, she said softly. The world is a mess of broken things. I want to put them in the right piles. I want things to fit. The drone beeped again. A green light pulsed on the warden's datapad. Touching, Brask drawled. Now, drink your beverages. The loom interprets shared sustenance as a bonding ritual. Kelp arrived with the drinks, sliding them onto the table with a trembling tentacle. On the house, the barista whispered. Mostly because I do not think you will live long enough to pay. Mason wrapped his hands around the hot ceramic mug. The heat was grounding. Hey, he said, looking up at Brask. The machine said 99.9% match. Does that mean the coffee is free permanently, or just when I am under arrest? Astra rolled her eyes, taking a delicate sip of her espresso. You are obsessed. It is pathetic. Is this a human thing? The relentless pursuit of discounts? It is a soldier thing, Mason corrected. You take what you can get when you can get it. Tell me about her, Astra said suddenly. Mason froze. Who? The mother, Astra said. She nodded toward Juno. The little one has your nose, but her eyes are different. Darker. Who was she? Mason set his mug down. The liquid inside rippled. The question felt like a physical blow, a precise strike to an unarmored section of his soul. He tried to deflect, tried to summon the cold, hard shell he wore like a second skin, but the loom was watching. The station was listening. If he closed off, the floor might open up. Elena, Mason said. The name tasted like ash and honey. She was a combat medic. We met on the shuttle to the Kairos front. She was brave, Astra stated, not asking. She was foolish, Mason said, his voice dropping to a whisper. She thought she could save everyone. She thought that if she just stitched enough people back together, the universe would balance out the killing. He looked at his hands. He saw them not holding a coffee mug, but covered in the slick, dark blood of the woman he loved, the night the orbital bombardment began. The night Praetor Sarn Halvek ordered the leveling of a civilian medical camp to flush out insurgents. She died, Mason said, the anger rising in him like bile. Because a man in a high tower decided a grid coordinate was more valuable than a hospital. The cafe was silent. Even Juno had stopped playing with the sugar packets. She looked at her father, her small face serious. Dad, she said softly, you are doing the scary face. Mason blinked, the red haze receding. He looked at Astra. He expected pity. He hated pity. But Astra was not looking at him with pity. She was looking at him with a strange, intense curiosity, her head tilted to the side. "You loved her," Astra said. "And now you want to balance the ledger. You think that if you kill the man in the tower, the universe will make sense again." "It is not about sense," Mason growled. "It is about closure." "Closure is a myth," Astra said, her tail twitching. "It is a story humans tell themselves so they can sleep. There is no closing the book, Mason. There is just turning the page." "I will turn the page after I burn the previous chapter," Mason said. The drone buzzed angrily. The lights dimmed again. The loom did not like the antagonism. "Switch topics." Dr. Rook's voice came through an earpiece that Astra was wearing, but it was loud enough for Mason to hear in the quiet room. Dr. Rook was standing by the entrance, monitoring a bank of portable servers that had been wheeled in. He looked frantic. "The wave function is collapsing. You are polarizing the bond. Find common ground quickly." Astra took a deep breath. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto Mason's. She ignored the war, the dead wife, the revenge plot. She looked at the little girl. "Does she like the ration bars?" Astra asked. "The ones they serve on the transport ships?" Mason blinked, thrown off balance. "What?" "Juno," Astra said. "Does she eat the synthetic protein bars? Most kids hate the texture. Like chewing on a rubber boot." Mason exhaled the tension in his shoulders, dropping an inch. "She hates them. She calls them sad bricks. I have to trade cigarettes for dried fruit whenever we dock." Astra smiled. It was a genuine smile, showing just a hint of her sharp teeth. "I know a place in Sector 7. They sell real apples, smuggled from a terrarium world. Expensive, but I could get you a discount." "A discount," Mason repeated, a corner of his mouth twitching upward. "Now you are speaking my language." "See," Astra said to the drone. "We are bonding. We are haggling. It is practically a marriage proposal." The lights stabilized. The loom purred. But the moment of peace was fragile. Mason's eyes, constantly scanning the room, caught movement near the entrance. The cafe was filled with approved patrons, mostly station staff, who had been trapped inside when the lockdown started. But 3 men had just entered from the kitchen area, wearing maintenance uniforms that were too clean. They moved with a coordinated predatory grace that Mason recognized instantly. They were not maintenance. They were military. One of them, a man with a shaved head and a faint scar running down his neck, locked eyes with Mason. He tapped his ear, whispering something into a comms unit. Mason felt the vibration of his own datapad in his pocket. He fished it out, keeping the movement concealed under the table. A message had arrived, encrypted from a contact he had paid heavily before arriving. Subject Halvek location confirmed. VIP suite 1A, currently under lockdown. Security detail minimal due to station emergency. Mason's heart hammered against his ribs. Sarn Halvek was here, in this building, trapped by the same lockdown that held Mason prisoner. It was fate. It was a gift. But the men in the maintenance uniforms were moving closer. They were not looking at Mason. They were looking at the drone. They were looking at Astra. And then, the leader's gaze drifted to Juno. "We have a problem," Mason said, his voice low and deadly calm. "What?" Astra asked, sensing the shift in his energy. Did the loom ask another question? 3 bogies, Mason said, not moving his lips. 9 o'clock. Fake maintenance. Carrying concealed weapons under their jackets. They are observers. Astra's ears swiveled. She did not look. She trusted him. Who's Halvex, Mason said. They are checking to see why the station is screaming. They want to know if the loom is vulnerable. Dr. Rook, who had edged closer to the table, whispered, "It is vulnerable, Mr. Grant. The loom is currently using you two as a reality anchor. It is channeling the station's stability through your synaptic connection. If they disrupt you, if they hurt you, the feedback could wipe this sector off the map." "They are not here to hurt me," Mason said, his hand slowly moving away from his coffee mug fingers, curling into a fist. "They are here to test the variables." The leader of the maintenance crew walked past their table. He paused, feigning interest in the drone. Then, with a casualness that made Mason's blood boil, the man reached out a hand toward Juno. "Cute kid," the man said, his voice raspy. "Does she have a permit to be in a secure zone?" It was a probe, a threat veiled as bureaucracy. He was testing Mason's reaction. He got one. Mason did not stand up. He exploded from the chair. In one fluid motion, Mason grabbed the man's outstretched wrist, twisted it with a sickening crack, and slammed the man's face into the metal table. Coffee cups went flying. The drone beeped frantically. The other two men reached for their jackets. "Down!" Mason roared, not at the attackers but at Juno. Juno ducked under the table instantly, a drill they had practiced 100 times. Mason kicked the chair backward, sending it skidding into the shins of the second attacker. As the man stumbled, Mason spun using the momentum to drive an elbow into the throat of the third man. It was efficient, brutal, and completely silent except for the thud of bodies hitting the floor. Warden Brask had his weapon out, but he was too slow. The fight was over before the security team had even disengaged their safeties. Mason stood over the three groaning men, his chest heaving. He had not killed them. He had disassembled them. The entire cafe was frozen. Kelp was hiding behind the espresso machine. "Daddy," Juno's voice came from under the table. "Can I come out now?" Mason took a breath, forcing his heart rate down. He looked at his hands. They were steady. "Stay there, Junebug." Brask stormed forward, his face purple with rage. "Grant, you just assaulted 3 station employees. I should authorize lethal force right now." "They were armed," Mason said, pointing to the jacket of the unconscious leader. A heavy, military-grade plasma pistol had slid out onto the floor. "And they touched my daughter." Brask looked at the weapon, then at Mason. The realization dawned on him. These weren't maintenance workers. But the loom was screaming again. The red lights were pulsing faster. The violence had spiked the instability ratings. Warning, aggression detected. Bond failure imminent. "Fix it," Rook yelled, clutching his hair. "The loom thinks you are fighting each other. It interprets the adrenaline as rejection." Mason looked at Astra. She was staring at him wide-eyed. She had seen the soldier. She had seen the killer. "Cover for me," Mason whispered. Astra looked at the unconscious men, then at Brask, then at the flashing red lights. She made a choice. She stood up, smoothed her jacket, and let out a loud, dramatic sigh that echoed through the silent cafe. "Oh, for the love of the stars, Mason," Astra exclaimed, throwing her hands up. "I told you I hate it when people interrupt our date. You did not have to hit them so hard. You possess such a temper." She turned to Brask, flashing a dazzling, apologetic smile. "Warden, please forgive him. He gets very territorial. It was just a misunderstanding. And honestly, the coffee was terribly bitter. It made us both cranky." She stepped over the bodies and placed a hand on Mason's chest. Her palm was warm against his shirt. She could feel his heart pounding like a hammer against steel. "Calm down, darling," she said, her voice dripping with fake affection, but her eyes sharp and commanding. "Sit down. Finish your drink. Do not ruin the mood." Mason stared at her. He understood. He sat back down. The loom paused. The sensors analyzed the proximity, the touch, the lowered heart rates. It analyzed Astra's dismissal of the violence as a mere lover's quarrel. Update. Protective bond spike detected. Threat level decreasing. The red lights faded back to amber. The siren cut off. The station seemed to let out a long, shuddering breath. Warden Brask holstered his weapon, looking from the unconscious spies to the couple sitting at the table. He motioned for his team to drag the bodies away. "You two," Brask muttered, pointing a finger at them. "You are a nightmare. An effective nightmare, but a nightmare." As the security team cleared the mess, Astra leaned across the table. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Those were Halvek's men," she said. It was a statement, not a question. "Yes," Mason replied. "You are going to go after him," Astra said, "as soon as this lockdown lifts. You are going to use this date as a cover to get close to the VIP suite." Mason looked at her. "I have to. He is right there, Astra. He is trapped." Astra looked down at her coffee. She traced the rim of the cup with a claw. "Dr. Rook says we are anchors. If you leave, the station destabilizes. If you go on a killing spree, the emotional backlash might crash the loom." "I do not care about the machine," Mason said. "I do," Astra said. She looked up, her eyes fierce. "I live here. My friends live here. That idiot Kelp lives here. I will not let you blow us all into the void just to settle a score." "Then stop me," Mason challenged. "No," Astra said. "I will not stop you. I will go with you," Mason blinked. "What?" "You need a handler," Astra said. "You need someone who knows the station. Someone who can get you past the biometrics on the upper levels. And frankly, you need someone to make sure you do not get shot before you can make your case." "Why would you help me?" Mason asked, suspicious. "You are a matchmaker. You weave people together. You do not help them commit murder." "I am not helping you commit murder," Astra said firmly. "I am helping you find the truth. And I checked Halvek's file while you were beating up those goons. The loom does not like him either. His probability cloud is black. It is rotting." She reached out and took his hand. It was a calculated move for the benefit of the cameras, but her grip was tight, real. "We finish the date," Astra commanded. "We satisfy the loom. We get the all clear to move freely. And then we go see your crater. But we do it my way. No collateral damage, no dead civilians. And Juno stays safe." Mason looked at his daughter, who was peeking out from under the table, holding a sugar packet like a trophy. "Deal," Mason said. Astra squeezed his hand, then pulled him up from the chair. She adjusted his collar, brushing off a speck of imaginary dust. "Good," she said. "Now stand up. You look like you are carrying the weight of a planet. If we are going to walk out of here, you need to look like a man in love, not a man on a death march." Mason stood. He felt the phantom weight of the rifle he wasn't holding, and the very real weight of the Falleri woman's hand in his. "I do not know how to look like a man in love," Mason admitted. Astra smirked, her tail swishing with renewed confidence. "Then, look like a man who just got free coffee. It is a start." She handed him his mug. "Drink up, Mason. I am not letting you face a warlord with the shakes. Bottoms up." Mason raised the mug. The coffee was cold, bitter, and tasted like sludge. It was the best thing he had tasted in 3 years. "To the date," Mason said dryly. "To the date," Astra replied, "and to not blowing up the station." As they drank, the loom updated its log one more time, scrolling silently across the data pad Brask had left behind. The corridors of Asterian Hub stretched out like the arteries of a dying giant, pulsing with the rhythmic thrum of the life support systems. The red emergency lighting that had bathed Sector 4 in the color of blood had receded, replaced by a permissive pulsating green that seemed to follow Mason Grant and Astra Niel wherever they stepped. It was a perverse kind of celebrity. The blast doors, which were currently sealed tight against the rest of the station's population, hissed open the moment the loom's sensors detected their biometric signatures. "Priority transit authorized," the station's automated voice chimed, sounding aggressively cheerful. "Coupling integrity stable. Enjoy your promenade." Mason stepped through a heavy bulkhead, his boots echoing on the grate. He adjusted the collar of his jacket, feeling the phantom weight of the eyes watching them from every camera lens and sensor node. "This is insane," Mason muttered. "We are walking through a military-grade lockdown like we own the place. Dating really does unlock the map." Astra walked beside him, her stride quick and silent. Her tail was no longer twitching in irritation. It was held low, and still a sign of intense concentration. She glanced at a security camera as they passed, her golden eyes narrowing. "Do not get used to it," Astra said. "The loom is parting the seas for us because it thinks we are rushing to a romantic rendezvous that will stabilize the quantum field. If it figures out you are actually rushing to assassinate a visiting diplomat, the doors will not just close, they will crush us." "He is not a diplomat," Mason corrected, his voice hard. "He is a butcher in a tailored suit." They reached the transit hub for the upper levels. This was the dividing line between the refugee sectors, where the air smelled of recycled sweat and curry, and the administration levels where the air was scrubbed until it smelled like nothing at all. But before they could cross, there was a matter to attend to. A matter that made Mason's chest tighten more than any enemy fire ever had. The Safe Harbor Child Care Center was a brightly colored bunker tucked next to the medical bay. It was designed to look cheerful with murals of smiling planets and friendly nebulas painted on the steel walls, but it was still a bunker. Mason knelt in front of Juno. The little girl looked small against the backdrop of the station's industrial machinery. She was holding the packet of sugar she had saved from the cafe. "Listen to me, Junebug," Mason said, his hands gripping her small shoulders. "I have to go do some boring paperwork with a lady. You are going to stay here with the nice droids for a few hours." "Okay." Juno looked at him, her eyes far too old for her face. She reached out and touched the scuff mark on his cheek. "Are you going to fight the bad men?" Mason froze. He had tried so hard to shield her from the reality of their life, from the violence that trailed him like a shadow. "No," he lied, the word tasting like copper. "I am just going to talk. I will be back before you finish your nap." "Promise?" Juno asked. "I promise," Mason said. It was the heaviest lie he had ever told. Astra stood by the door watching. She did not interfere, but her ears were swiveled toward them, catching every frequency of the interaction. When Mason stood up and handed Juno over to the intake nurse, a harried-looking woman with blue skin, he looked like he was leaving a piece of his own heart behind the glass. They walked away in silence. Mason did not look back. If he looked back, he would stop. And if he stopped, Sarn Halvek would leave this station alive. "You are lying to her," Astra said quietly, as they entered the lift that would take them to the administrative ring. "I am protecting her," Mason snapped. "You are protecting yourself," Astra countered, her voice devoid of judgment, but full of sharp truth. "You think if you kill Halvek, you wash the blood off your hands. You think you can come back to that child care center as a clean man, a normal father." Mason slammed his hand against the lift wall. The metal rang. He ordered the bombardment of a medical frigate. He erased a city because he didn't like the resistance numbers. Justice was bought and paid for by his government. "If I do not balance the scale, who will?" "The scale is not yours to balance, Mason," Astra said, stepping closer to him. The lift was rising rapidly, the G-force pressing them into the floor. "And if you pull that trigger, you are not coming back." "Not really. The Mason Grant who picks up Juno this evening will be a hollow shell, and she will know. Kids always know." Mason stared at the floor indicator as the numbers climbed. Level 10, Level 11, Level 12. "I do not have a choice," he whispered. "We always have a choice," Astra said. "That is the one thing the loom cannot predict." The lift doors hissed open. They were in the administration ring. The lighting here was soft, elegant, and white. The walls were lined with real wood, a luxury that cost more than a starship. Astra grabbed Mason's arm before he could storm out. "Wait, look." She pointed down the long, curved corridor. It was sparsely populated with bureaucrats moving between offices, but Astra was not looking at them. She was looking at a man standing near a holographic fountain, pretending to read a data pad. "Third pillar," Astra whispered. "Gray suit. Notice how he is not shifting his weight. He is standing at attention, and he is checking the reflection in the fountain glass, not the screen." Mason squinted. The man was indeed standing with the rigid posture of a soldier. "One of Halvek's?" Mason asked. "Or station intelligence," Astra said. "But my money is on Halvek. He knows the station is unstable. He has eyes everywhere." She pulled Mason deeper into the shadow of a decorative archway. "I have spent 10 years watching people in this station, Mason. I watch them lie to themselves about who they love. I watch them hide their affairs and their fears. I know what a person looks like when they are waiting for a signal." Mason looked at her with a newfound respect. Under the cat ears and the sarcasm, there was a razor-sharp mind at work. "So, how do we get past him?" "We do not," Astra said. "We act like we belong. Put your arm around my waist." Mason hesitated. "What? We are on a date, remember," Astra hissed. "The loom has given us clearance. If we look like two lovers sneaking off to a private viewing deck, he will ignore us. If we look like a commando unit, he will radio for backup." Mason gritted his teeth and wrapped his arm around Astra's waist. She felt small against him, but solid. She leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. It was a perfect performance. "Walk slow," Astra murmured. "Laugh at something I say." "I do not know any jokes," Mason muttered. "Then laugh at your own misery," she said. "It seems ample enough." Mason let out a forced bark-like laugh. The man by the fountain glanced up, saw a couple engrossed in each other, and returned his gaze to the datapad. They passed him without incident. As they rounded the corner away from the watcher, Mason dropped his arm instantly. Astra smoothed her jacket, her expression unreadable. "Efficiency," she said. That is all that was. "Right," Mason said. "Efficiency." They reached a junction. To the left lay the path to the grand hearing chamber, where Praetor Sarn Halvek was currently spinning lies to a panel of weary judges. To the right was a service corridor marked Restricted Engineering Access. Mason turned left. "Mason," Astra said, stopping dead. "The hearing is that way," Mason said, pointing. "I know," Astra said. "But look at the service corridor." Mason looked. The heavy door to the engineering section had been forced. The lock panel was not broken. It had been bypassed with a high-level military decryption tool. A faint trail of mud, the kind of reddish mud found in the unpaved refugee sectors, tracked into the pristine hallway. "Someone broke in," Mason said. "So what? Probably scavengers." "Scavengers do not have military decryption keys," Astra said, her voice rising in urgency. "And they do not go down there. That leads to the sublevel, to the physical core of the loom." Mason looked at the door, then back toward the hearing chamber. "That is not my mission, Astra. My mission is Halvek." "Think Mason." Astra grabbed his jacket lapels, forcing him to look at her. "Why is Halvek here? Really, to clear his name. He is a warlord. He does not care about his reputation. He is here because the loom is the most powerful predictive engine in the galaxy, and it is sitting under a civilian station guarded by rent-a-cops." She gestured to the forced door. "If his men get to the core while the station is in this fragile resonant state, they can do more than just predict the future. They can rewrite the probability parameters. They can seize the station without firing a shot. They can turn the loom into a weapon." Mason stared at the dark corridor. He thought of the men in the cafe. He thought of the observers Halvek had planted. "If I go down there," Mason said slowly, "I miss the hearing. Halvek walks free." "If you go to the hearing," Astra said, "you might kill Halvek, but his men will take the loom. They will vent the atmosphere in the refugee sectors to save power. They will kill Juno." The name hung in the air like a physical weight. Mason looked toward the hearing chamber. He could almost see Halvek's face, smug and untouchable. He could feel the trigger under his finger. It was right there. 2 minutes walk, a bullet in the brain, the end of the nightmare. Then he looked at the dark, gaping maw of the engineering corridor. He looked at Astra. Her golden eyes were wide, pleading not for herself, but for the thousands of souls aboard the Asterian hub. Damn it, Mason exhaled the sound, tearing out of his throat. He turned away from the hearing chamber. He drew the heavy kinetic pistol he had taken from the unconscious man in the cafe. "We go down," Mason said. Astra let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for a lifetime. "Thank you." "Do not thank me yet," Mason grunted, checking the charge on the weapon. "I am still going to kill him. I am just going to ruin his heist first." They moved into the service corridor. The air here was different, colder smelling of ozone and ancient dust. The walls were lined with thick bundles of cabling that pulsed with the same rhythm as the loom's heartbeat. They descended 3 flights of stairs, moving deeper into the station's gut. The happy green lights of the upper levels were gone, replaced by flickering amber emergency strobes. "Quiet," Mason signaled, holding up a fist. Ahead of them, in a widening of the corridor that served as a data junction, 3 figures were working. They were dressed in the same black tactical gear as the men in the cafe, but these were technicians. They had panels ripped open and were splicing devices directly into the station's neural pathways. Bypassing the firewall, one of them said, his voice echoing slightly. "We are at 80%. The loom is distracted by the anomaly in Sector 4. "Keep pushing," another voice commanded. "The Praetor wants full control before the closing arguments." Mason looked at Astra. He pointed to himself, then to the left flank. He pointed to her, then to a stack of crates on the right. Astra nodded. She wasn't a soldier, but she was a survivor. She moved silently, her filiary physiology allowing her to step without making a sound. Mason waited until she was in position. Then he stepped out from cover. "Hey!" he shouted, his voice booming in the confined space. "You need a permit for that?" The 3 technicians spun around, reaching for their sidearms. Mason fired. The kinetic round took the first man in the shoulder, spinning him around and knocking him into the open server rack. Sparks showered down. The other 2 returned fire. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, scorching the metal walls. Mason dove behind a support pillar, the heat of a near miss singing his ear. "Flanking!" one of the technicians yelled. They were moving to pin him down. Mason leaned out and fired 2 suppressed shots, but the technicians had taken cover behind heavy machinery. Suddenly, a heavy metal crate came flying out of the shadows on the right, hurled with surprising force. It crashed into the second technician's knees. He howled in pain and stumbled. Astra had pushed it. She didn't have a gun, but she had leverage and gravity. Mason used the distraction. He broke cover, sprinting across the open gap. He tackled the stumbling man, driving him into the floor. The 3rd technician popped up, aiming point blank at Mason's exposed back. "Mason!" Astra screamed. Mason rolled, but not fast enough. A plasma bolt grazed his side, burning through his jacket and searing the flesh beneath. He grunted, ignoring the pain, and fired upward from his back. The shot hit the 3rd technician's weapon, causing it to overheat and explode in his hands. The man screamed and dropped. Silence returned to the corridor, broken only by the groans of the injured men and the sizzling of Mason's jacket. Mason struggled to his feet, clutching his side. His hand came away wet with blood. "Mason." Astra was at his side in an instant. Her hands were shaking, but her movements were precise. She ripped open the burnt fabric of his jacket to inspect the wound. "It is a graze," Mason wheezed, leaning against the wall. "Cauterized mostly. I am fine." "You are not fine," Astra hissed. Her ears were flattened against her skull in distress. "You are an idiot. You stood out in the open." "I drew their fire," Mason said. It worked. He looked at the open console the technicians had been hacking. "See what they were doing, quickly." Astra moved to the console, her fingers flying over the alien keyboard. They were injecting a virus, a slave protocol. They wanted to unshackle the loom's safety limits. She paused, her eyes widening as she read the scrolling data. "Mason, look at this." Mason limped over, looking at the screen. Amidst the streams of code, there were files tagged with high-priority encryption. Astra decrypted them with a bypass code she had evidently memorized from her time at the desk. Reality anchor resonance, Astra read. Subject human Fili pairings, hypothesis. The emotional volatility of this specific cross-species bond creates a unique frequency that can stabilize the loom during high-energy outputs. She looked at Mason. Halvek knew. He didn't just want the station. He knew about the anomaly. He knew that a perfect mate match wasn't just romance. It was a power source. He was going to use us, Mason realized, his voice cold. If he took the station, he would have hooked us up to this machine like batteries. Me, Astra corrected softly. He would have used me. Fili are the conductors. Humans are just the ground wire. She tapped another file. It opened a video log. It was dated 3 years ago. The siege of Kiros. It was footage from a drone. It showed a command tent. Sarn Halvek was standing over a map. A subordinate was asking about the civilian medical camp. Burn it, Halvek said in the video, his voice clear and bored. The resistance is using the wounded as shields. Burn the camp. We need the grid coordinate for the artillery. Mason watched the screen. He watched the man sign his wife's death warrant as casually as ordering lunch. His hand shook. He reached out and smashed the console screen with the butt of his pistol. Glass shattered. We have the evidence, Astra said, her voice trembling. She pulled a data drive from the port. This drive logs everything. The virus, the hack, the war crimes. The loom recorded it all because they were plugged into its system. Mason leaned his head back against the cold metal wall. The pain in his side was a throbbing fire, but the pain in his chest was worse. It is not enough. He will have lawyers. He will have loopholes. It is a start, Astra said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small emergency medkit. Sit down. I need to dress that wound before you bleed out on my boots. Mason slid down the wall to a sitting position. Astra knelt between his legs, peeling back the ruined shirt. She applied a cooling gel that stung like ice, then wrapped a pressure bandage around his ribs. Her hands were gentle. For a moment, the war, the station, and the loom faded. It was just the two of them in the dim amber light. 99.9%, Astra murmured, trying to keep her voice steady as she fastened the clip. And you have the pain tolerance of a kitten. Stop flinching. I am not flinching, Mason grunted through clenched teeth. I am vibrating with manly endurance. Astra let out a wet, choked laugh. She looked up at him. Her face was inches from his. He could see the flecks of green in her golden eyes. He could see the fear she was hiding behind the bravado. You could have died, she whispered. When that bolt hit you, I felt it. In here. She tapped her chest. Is that the loom or is that me? Mason looked at her. He thought of Elena. He thought of how he had closed his heart like a steel trap the day she died. He thought he had nothing left to give. But looking at Astra, this strange, infuriating, brave creature who had just thrown a crate at an assassin for him, he felt a crack in the steel. I do not know, Mason said softly. He reached out his rough thumb, brushing a smudge of grease from her cheek. But thank you for the save. Astra leaned into his touch for a fraction of a second, then pulled back, clearing her throat. Do not get sentimental, Grant. We are not done. Suddenly, the wall of monitors in the junction flickered to life. All of them. The static cleared to reveal a face. It was Praetor Sarn Halvek. He was sitting in the hearing chamber, but he was looking directly into the camera as if he could see them huddled in the dark service corridor. Sergeant Grant, Halvek said. His voice was smooth, cultured, and terrifying. Or is it Ghost of Kiros? Now I heard you were in the building. Mason stiffened his hand, going to his gun. Do not bother, Halvek smiled. I am not looking at a feed. I am speaking to the system. I know you are down there. My technicians stopped reporting in, which means you have been busy. Halvek leaned forward. You have the data drive, I assume. The proof of my indiscretions. Keep it. It won't matter. In 10 minutes, the council will rule in my favor. History is written by the victor sergeant, and I am about to win a very large prize. You are not taking the station, Mason snarled at the screen. The station, Halvek laughed. The station is just a shell. I want what is underneath. And thanks to you and your pet, the loom is fully awake. You have primed the pump for me. Halvek's eyes shifted, looking at something off screen. Come up to the chamber, Mason. Bring the girl. Let us finish this properly. If you try to run, I will have security depressurize the childcare sector. I believe you left something valuable there. The screen went black. Mason sat frozen. The threat to Juno hit him like a physical blow. He knows, Mason whispered. He knows where she is. The station gave a lurch. It wasn't an explosion. It was something deeper. The floor vibrated with a low, resonant frequency that rattled Mason's teeth. The loom had skipped a beat. Astra gasped, clutching her head. Astra, Mason grabbed her shoulders. What is it? Astra's eyes were wide. The pupils dilated until they were almost entirely black. She wasn't looking at him. She was listening to something he couldn't hear. It is speaking, Astra whispered, her voice terrified. The loom. It is screaming. What is it saying? Mason asked, urgency rising. Astra looked at him, and for a moment, she looked alien ancient. It says the variables are wrong. It says the anchor is loose. She shook her head, the moment passing. She blinked, returning to herself, but her hands were trembling violently. We have to go, Astra said, grabbing Mason's arm and hauling him up. We have to get to that hearing. We have to finish this date. Finish the date? Mason asked, bewildered. Halvek just threatened to space my daughter. Halvek thinks he is in control, Astra said, her voice fierce. But he does not hear the whisper. The station is about to tear itself apart, Mason. If we do not stabilize the connection, if we do not prove to this god machine that we are a valid unit, there won't be a station left for Halvek to conquer. She pulled him toward the stairs. We are going to the hearing. We are going to look that monster in the eye. And we are going to save your daughter. But you have to trust me. Mason looked at the bandage on his side. He looked at the data drive in Astra's hand. He looked at the fire in her eyes. He realized then that he wasn't the leader of this mission anymore. He was the muscle. She was the heart. Lead the way, Mason said. As they ran back toward the upper levels, the lights in the corridor began to pulse, in time with their footsteps, 2 heartbeats synchronized in the dark. The grand hearing chamber of Asterian Hub was a masterpiece of intimidation disguised as architecture. It was a vast, amphitheater-style room, carved from white acoustic polymer and polished transparent aluminum, designed to make the accused feel small and the judges feel like gods. The ceiling was a dome of reinforced glass, looking out into the nebula, where the swirling gases painted the void in bruises of purple and gold. Mason Grant felt the cold air of the chamber hit his face, a stark contrast to the humid, ozone-heavy heat of the service tunnels they had just crawled out of. He adjusted his jacket, wincing, as the fabric pulled against the fresh bandage on his side. He looked like a wrecked, soot-stained, blood-spotted, with eyes that burned with the frantic energy of a hunted animal. Beside him, Astra Nael looked no better, her white fur matted with grease, her tail lashing anxiously. They did not look like guests. They looked like the aftermath of a riot. Hold, Warden Brask grunted, stepping in front of them at the heavy double doors. The warden looked tired. His cybernetic jaw clicked as he ground his teeth. You cannot go in there looking like you just fought a plasma conduit and lost. This is a diplomatic session. We are not guests, Warden, Astra said, her voice sharp. She smoothed her jacket, though it did little to hide the scorch marks. We are biological components of the station's life support system. Unless you want the gravity to invert in the middle of the prosecutor's opening statement, you will let us in. Brask looked at the datapad in his hand. The Loom's status bar was hovering in the amber zone, pulsing, in time with Mason and Astra's proximity. "Fine," Brask spat. "But you sit in the observation box. You do not speak. You do not breathe loud. And Grant, if you even look like you are reaching for a weapon, my snipers in the gallery will vaporize you before you clear leather." "Understood," Mason said. His voice was a flat, dead thing. Brask signaled the guards. The doors hissed open. The sound of the chamber was a low, polite murmur, the sound of civilized people discussing the price of genocide. Hundreds of delegates from a dozen systems sat in the tiered rows, their robes and uniforms pristine. In the center of the room, bathed in a single spotlight, stood Praetor Sarn Halvek. He looked magnificent. He was wearing a dress uniform of deep crimson unadorned, save for a single Medal of Valor, a lie pinned to his chest. He was speaking, his voice amplified by the room's acoustics, so that it sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once. "And so we must ask ourselves," Halvek was saying, his tone one of sorrowful wisdom, "is peace merely the absence of fire, or is it the willingness to make the hard choices that extinguish the spark before it becomes an inferno?" Kairos was a tragedy, yes, but it was a necessary tragedy, a surgical excision to save the body of the Alliance. Mason stepped into the room, and for a moment the world narrowed down to a tunnel. At the end of that tunnel was the man who had ordered the strike, the man who had turned a hospital into a crater. Mason felt the heavy kinetic pistol tucked inside his jacket. It felt hot against his skin, vibrating with potential energy. "Easy," Astra whispered, her hand brushing his arm. "Breathe. He is baiting the room. Do not let him bait you." They were ushered to a small, secluded box to the side of the main stage, ostensibly reserved for technical monitoring. It gave them a clear view of the podium, less than 50 feet away. "He is lying," Mason whispered, his hands gripping the railing until his knuckles turned white. "Every word. He is rewriting it." "That is what winners do," Astra said, her golden eyes scanning the crowd, not looking at Halvek, but at the shadows. "He is selling a narrative, and they are buying it because it is cheaper than another war." Mason watched as a delegate from the Trade Federation nodded in agreement with Halvek. He felt a wave of nausea. He wanted to scream. He wanted to jump the rail and tear Halvek apart with his bare hands. "Refreshments!" a voice rasped. Mason jumped, spinning around. Kelp, the multi-eyed barista from the Free Nebula Cafe, was standing behind them with a sleek, hovering cart. How he had gotten past security was a mystery, though Kelp possessed a strange quality of being completely unnoticeable until he wanted to be seen. "Kelp," Astra hissed. "What are you doing here?" "The Loom authorized a caffeine resupply," Kelp said, pouring a dark, oily liquid into 2 porcelain cups. "It seems to think you two function better when your heart rates are dangerously elevated. Also, I wanted to see the show." He handed a cup to Mason. "Black, like your mood. And for the lady, an herbal infusion to prevent you from clawing the furniture." "This is a secure diplomatic hearing," Mason said, taking the cup automatically. "And you are a man carrying a concealed weapon and a bleeding ribcage." Kelp observed his tentacles, arranging sugar cubes with geometric precision. "We are all breaking rules today. Drink. It is going to be a long hour." Kelp rolled his cart back into the shadows, leaving them alone again. On the stage, the questioning phase had begun. A timid-looking judge asked Halvek about the civilian casualties. Halvek smiled a sad, practiced smile. "There were no civilians in that sector, Your Honor. The resistance used families as shields. We gave them 3 hours to evacuate. We have logs." "Lies," Mason growled. He jammed the comms. No one got the warning. "We have the real logs," Astra reminded him, patting the pocket where the data drive sat. "We just need to get them to the council without getting shot." Halvek turned then. He rotated on his heel, his eyes sweeping the room, and stopped exactly on their box. He didn't look surprised. He looked delighted. "But do not take my word for it. Halvex said, his voice booming. We have a veteran of that conflict here today. A man who lost everything and yet has come to Asterion to find a new beginning. Sergeant Mason Grant. The spotlight swung. It blinded Mason, pinning him against the white wall. The room fell silent. Hundreds of faces turned to look at him. This was not part of the plan, Astra whispered, her ears flattening. Come down, Sergeant. Halvex beckoned, his hand open in a gesture of welcome. Join me. Let us show the Council that the wounds of the past can heal. It was a trap. A blatant, suicidal trap. If Mason refused, he looked like a bitter radical. If he went down, he was in the kill zone. Do not go, Astra said. I have to, Mason said. He handed her his coffee cup. Hold the drive. If anything happens, plug it into the main terminal. Mason walked out of the box and down the stairs. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. He could hear the click of his own boots on the marble floor. He walked up the ramp to the podium. He stood face to face with Sarn Halvex. Up close, Halvex smelled of expensive cologne and ozone. His eyes were cold, dead things that did not match his benevolent smile. Sergeant, Halvex said, leaning in as if to embrace a brother in arms. The microphone didn't pick up his whisper. You look terrible. But then you always were a messy soldier. I have the drive, Sarn, Mason whispered back, his body rigid. I know about the virus. I know about the loom. Halvex chuckled softly. Of course you do. That is why I invited you down. Look at them, Mason. He gestured to the audience. They do not care about the truth. They care about stability. And I am about to offer them the ultimate stability. Halvex leaned closer, his lips brushing Mason's ear. Elena called for you, you know, on the medical frequency. Before the fire took the comms tower, she was screaming your name. The world stopped. The sound of the room vanished. The light vanished. All Mason could see was the face of the man in front of him. The red haze of rage that he had been holding back for 3 years finally snapped the leash. She called for me. Mason's hand went into his jacket. His fingers wrapped around the grip of the pistol. He didn't care about the snipers. He didn't care about the station. He was going to put a bullet through this monster's heart and watch the light go out. Do it, Halvex whispered. Show them the monster you are. Give me the excuse to purge this station. Mason drew the gun. A collective gasp went up from the crowd. Security guards raised their rifles. The snipers in the gallery acquired their targets. Mason. The voice was not Astra's. It was not Halvex. It came from the massive viewing screen behind the podium, which was supposed to be displaying maps of the sector. The static cleared, replaced by a grainy, shaky video feed. It was the Safe Harbor Child Care Center. Juno was huddled in a corner, clutching a stuffed bear. The lights in the center were flickering red. She was crying. Dad, Juno sobbed, looking at the camera. The doors are locked. The air smells funny. I want to go home. Mason froze. The gun was halfway raised. Dad, Juno called again, her voice tiny and terrified. Halvex stepped back, feigning shock. Oh my. It seems there is a malfunction in the life support grid. A depressurization event in the childcare sector. How tragic. If only the station were not so unstable. He looked at Mason, his eyes gleaming with victory. You can kill me, Mason. But by the time my body hits the floor, the air in that room will be gone. Or you can surrender. You can give me the drive and I might be able to override the lockout. It was the ultimate checkmate. Mason looked at the screen. He saw his daughter's face. He saw the only thing in the universe that mattered. He looked at the gun in his hand. He looked at Halvex's throat. 1 second to shoot. 10 minutes to mourn. Or Astra was suddenly there. She hadn't stayed in the box. She had vaulted the rail and sprinted across the stage. She didn't have a weapon. She had a hand, and she laid it gently on Mason's wrist, right over the pulse point where his heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against his skin. Mason, Astra said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were pleading. "Look at me, not him, me." Mason turned his head slowly. He felt like he was moving through molasses. "He wants you to shoot," Astra said softly. "He has men in the server room. The moment there is chaos, they seize the loom. He sacrifices himself to give them the window. He does not care if he dies as long as he wins." "He has Juno," Mason choked out. "No," Astra said. "We have Juno, but only if you make the choice, the human choice." She pressed a button on her wrist communicator, the one linked to Dr. Rook. "Doctor," Astra said, her voice amplified by the podium microphone she had stepped near. "Is the channel open?" "Open!" Dr. Rook's voice crackled over the speakers. "But the instability is at critical. The loom is demanding a new anchor point immediately. It is reading the violence in the chamber as a rejection event." The station lurched violently. A piece of the glass ceiling cracked, a spiderweb fracture appearing against the stars. The lights in the chamber flickered from white to an angry pulsing crimson. The loom was taking over. A holographic interface materialized in the center of the stage between Mason and Halvek. It was the loom's judgment avatar, a swirling column of light and data. Alert. The mechanical voice was deafening. Social dissonance detected. Conflict imminent. Reality integrity at 15%. Subjects identified: Mason Grant, Astra Niel, Halvek. Demand resolution. Confirm bond or initiate purge protocol. The purge protocol meant venting the station. It meant everyone died. Halvek laughed. "You see, the machine knows. It knows you are broken, Mason. It knows you are a killer. It cannot bond with a killer." Mason looked at the swirling light. He looked at the gun. He slowly, deliberately engaged the safety. He let the gun drop from his fingers. It clattered loudly on the marble floor. "I am not a killer," Mason said. His voice shook, but it was loud enough to be heard. "I was, but I am not anymore." He reached into his other pocket and pulled out the data drive, the one containing the video of Halvek ordering the war crime. "I am a father," Mason said. He looked at the camera, speaking to Juno on the screen. "I am just a dad, Junebug, and I am coming to get you." He slammed the data drive into the loom's interface slot. No, Halvek lunged, but it was too late. The loom absorbed the data instantly. The swirling light changed color from red to a blinding pure white. The video of the war crime didn't play on the screen. Instead, the data became the room. The loom projected the memory into the air, a holographic recreation of the Kairos massacre, playing out in 3 dimensions around the terrified delegates. They saw the camp. They saw the fire. They heard Halvek's voice ordering the burn. "This is falsified," Halvek screamed, backing away as a holographic explosion bloomed near his face. "The loom does not lie," Astra said, her voice ringing out. She stepped next to Mason, grabbing his hand. "It records reality, and this is your reality, Praetor." But the station was still shaking. The truth was out, but the emotional anchor was still loose. The loom needed one last thing. It needed the commitment to stabilize the connection it had forged between Mason and Astra. "Query," the loom's voice boomed. "Truth verified. Emotional context required. Define the nature of the bond." They were standing in the center of a holographic war zone, watched by hundreds of people and a god machine. "It wants a label," Astra whispered, panic edging into her voice. "It wants us to say we are in love. Mason, you have to lie. Tell it we are soulmates. Tell it we are destined." Mason looked at her. He saw the grease on her face, the fear in her eyes, and the fierce, unyielding loyalty that had kept him alive for the last 6 hours. "No," Mason said. "No more lies." He looked up at the light. "We are not soulmates," Mason shouted at the machine. "We are not a fairy tale. I am a broken man who can't sleep without checking the exits. She is a woman who hides behind a desk because she is afraid of being used," the crowd murmured. Astra stared at him, stunned. But Mason continued squeezing Astra's hand tight. She threw a crate at a gunman for me. She drank terrible coffee with me. And she reminded me that my daughter needs a father, not a ghost. He looked at Astra. I do not know if that is love, but it is real. It is 99.9% real. And right now, that is enough for me to want to stay alive. The room held its breath. Astra looked at him. Tears welled in her golden eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. She let out a shaky, wet laugh. You are terrible at vows, she said, her voice cracking. You just called me a coward in front of the entire Galaxy Council. I was being honest, Mason said. Fine. Astra wiped her eyes with her free hand. If we are being honest, you are stubborn, you have terrible taste in tactical plans, and you carry too much baggage. She looked up at the loom. But he is the first person in 10 years who looked at me and didn't see a tool. He saw a partner. So I choose him. Defective parts and all. Astra smiled a genuine, radiant smile. Besides, he owes me a coffee. He cannot die until he pays. Processing. The swirling light paused. The holographic fire of the war zone faded. The shaking stopped. The red lights in the childcare center on the screen turned to a steady, safe green. Analysis. Bond confirmed. Designation. Non-linear partnership. Stability restored. Anchor locked. The station let out a low hum of contentment. The air pressure normalized. Halvek stood alone on the stage, the hologram of his crimes still flickering faintly around him like ghosts. He looked at the council. He saw their faces, disgust, horror, judgment. He had lost the room. He had lost the narrative. This is a trick, Halvek stammered. A manipulation of the system. It is over, Sarn, Mason said, stepping forward. The lockdown on the childcare center is lifted. Security is on its way. Halvek looked at Mason. Then, he looked at the exit. Not yet, Halvek hissed. He tapped a sequence on his wrist. A small, personal teleporter device, illegal, unstable, and very expensive, flared at his belt. I still have the core, Halvek snarled. If I cannot rule this station, I will break it. With a flash of distorted light, Halvek vanished from the stage. He went to the sublevel, Astra shouted. He is going manually to the loom's heart. Brask and the security team were swarming the stage now, but they were confused, looking for a target that was gone. Warden, Mason yelled. He is going for the physical core. He is going to detonate the primary coupling. Brask looked at Mason. The hostility was gone, replaced by grim professional respect. Go. My men will clear the chamber and secure the child. You two finish this. Juno, Mason asked, hesitating. I will get her personally, Brask promised. Go. Mason grabbed Astra's hand. They didn't need to speak. They turned and ran, not away from the danger, but toward it. As they sprinted out of the grand chamber, leaving the stunned diplomats behind, Astra slowed for a fraction of a second. She clutched her head. The whisper, she gasped. It is back. What is it saying? Mason asked, pulling her along. Astra looked at him, her eyes glowing with a faint internal light that matched the loom's energy. It is not just predicting anymore, Mason, she whispered. It is asking for directions. It wants to know how to punish him. Then let's go show it, Mason said. They plunged into the service elevator, descending into the dark once more, leaving the gallery of monsters behind for the belly of the beast. The elevator shaft was not merely dark. It was an absence of light, a throat of durasteel, plunging into the belly of a leviathan. The car descended at a speed that made Mason Grant's knees buckle, the air pressure spiking until his ears popped. Mason checked the magazine of his pistol. It was a reflex, a comforting lie, he told himself. 3 rounds left. Against a man wearing a personal distortion field and wielding the power of a precursor god machine, 3 rounds of kinetic lead felt like throwing pebbles at a thunderstorm. Beside him, Astra Niel was vibrating. It was not fear. It was a resonance. Her white hair was standing on end, floating slightly, as if gravity had decided to make an exception for her. Her golden eyes were fixed on the floor numbers counting down, but Mason suspected she was seeing through the metal, down to the thing that waited for them. "If I do not make it back up," Mason said, his voice rough against the screech of the elevator brakes. "If this goes sideways and you have to seal the core, tell Juno I tried. Tell her I did not go looking for a fight. Tell her I was coming to pick her up." Astra snapped her head toward him. Her tail lashed, hitting the metal wall with a sharp thwack. "Stop it," she hissed. "Do not speak like a bad holofilm script. You are coming back. You are going to pick her up yourself. I am not delivering your posthumous apologies, Mason. I am a matchmaker, not a grief counselor." "I am being realistic," Mason said. "You are being a martyr," Astra countered, grabbing his jacket collar and pulling him down to her eye level. "And the loom does not need a martyr. It needs a partner. So keep your head in the game, soldier. The moment you start writing your eulogy is the moment you get us both killed." The elevator slammed to a halt. The doors groaned, fighting a magnetic lock, before Warden Brask's override codes kicked in. With a spark of protesting metal, they slid open. They were not in a maintenance basement. The core of Asterion Hub was a cathedral. It was a cavernous space vast enough to house a destroyer, lined not with servers or cables, but with pillars of living liquid metal that flowed upward like reverse waterfalls. In the center of the room, suspended over a chasm of absolute darkness, was the loom. It was not a machine. It was a star caught in a spiderweb. Strands of hard light, blue, gold, and violet wove together in a complex, shifting geometry that hurt the eyes to look at. It pulsed with a sound that wasn't sound, but a pressure in the skull. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. And standing on the walkway directly beneath it, looking like an insect before an altar, was Praetor Sarn Halvek. He had bypassed the physical controls. He had plugged his personal interface directly into the primary optic nerve of the station. "You are late," Halvek's voice boomed, amplified by the acoustics of the chamber. He didn't turn around. He was staring up into the light, his arms spread wide as if conducting an orchestra. "Step away from the interface, Sarn," Mason shouted, stepping onto the walkway. He leveled his pistol, but his hand wavered. The air here was thick, viscous. It felt like moving underwater. Halvek turned slowly. His eyes were bleeding light. The sheer amount of data pouring into his neural lace was burning him out from the inside, but he was smiling the smile of a man who had seen the face of God and found it pliable. "Why would I step away?" Halvek laughed, a sound that distorted and echoed. "I have just found the controls to history, Mason. Do you see it? The probability threads, I can pull one, and the resistance never formed. I can pull another, and your wife never boarded that medical frigate." Mason froze. The offer hung in the air, a poisoned apple. "Do not listen to him," Astra screamed. She was clutching her head, her knees shaking. "He is lying. The loom does not change the past. It anchors the present. If he pulls those threads, he unravels reality." "She lacks imagination," Halvek sneered. He raised a hand, and the liquid metal of the walkway rippled. Suddenly, gravity shifted 90 degrees. Mason yelled as the floor became a wall. He slid scrambling for purchase on the smooth metal. His gun skittered away, falling into the dark void below. He grabbed the edge of a stanchion, his legs dangling over nothingness. "Mason!" Astra shouted. She wasn't affected. She was standing on the vertical surface as if she were magnetized. Halvek flicked his wrist. "Fall, Sergeant. Become a statistic." The metal stanchion turned into liquid under Mason's hand. His grip dissolved. He fell. He didn't scream. He just reached out, watching the light of the loom recede. Then, something caught him. It wasn't a hand. It was a force. A band of golden light, solid as steel, wrapped around his waist and jerked him to a halt in midair. Mason looked up. Astra was standing on the edge of the walkway. She wasn't holding a rope. She was holding the air. Her hand was outstretched, fingers clawed, and the golden light of the loom was streaming from her own body, extending down to catch him. She hauled him up. It was impossible physics. She was 100 pounds of Faliri biology, pulling a 200-pound combat veteran against distorted gravity, but she did it with a savage primal roar that shook the pillars of the room. She threw him back onto the walkway. The gravity snapped back to normal. Mason gasped for air, staring at her. Astra was glowing. Her veins were tracing patterns of light under her fur. "What?" Mason stammered. "What are you?" Astra looked at her own hands, terrified. "I do not know. I just didn't want you to fall. I just wanted to catch you." "Fascinating," Halvek murmured. He looked at Astra with a biologist's hunger. "I suspected, but to see it, the Faliri were not just the caretakers of this station, were they? You are the interface." He stepped closer, the loom pulsing violently above him. "The builders left a lock and they left a key. The loom is the lock. Your species, you, are the key." "I am not a key," Astra spat, stepping in front of Mason. "I am a person." "You are a component," Halvek roared. He slammed his hand onto the console. "And I will use you to rewrite this galaxy," the station screamed. The metal walls began to groan, twisting inward. The loom turned a violent bruised purple. "Warning, reality shear detected. Chronological integrity failing." "He is forcing a resonance," Astra shouted over the noise. "He is trying to make the loom accept his version of the truth. He is going to break the station apart." "How do we stop him?" Mason yelled, standing up. "I lost the gun." "We do not need a gun," Astra said, her voice sounding strange, layered as if 1,000 voices were speaking through her. "We need an anchor. He is using hate. He is using control." The loom was not built for control. It was built for connection. Halvek looked at them, his face twisting. "Love you think love will stop me. Love is a chemical defect. It is an algorithm for breeding." "Love is survival," Mason roared back. He took a step forward, empty-handed. "Algorithms do not check under the bed for monsters. Algorithms do not hold a feverish child all night, I do." "Then die with your sentiments," Halvek shrieked. He manipulated the console. A wave of force-pure rejection slammed into them. It was meant to atomize them. But Mason didn't dodge. He didn't run. He did what he had done in the cafe. He stepped in front of Astra. He planted his feet. He became the shield. The wave hit him. It felt like being hit by a freight train. It tore at his clothes. It burned his skin. It tried to erase his existence. But he held. He thought of Juno. He thought of Elena. He thought of the woman standing behind him who had thrown a crate for him. He was the rock. "Astra," Mason gritted out through clenched teeth, blood trickling from his nose. "Now do it now." Astra looked at his back. She saw him burning to keep her safe. And the dam inside her broke. She didn't use the console. She didn't type a code. She closed her eyes and screamed, not with her voice, but with her mind. She called out to the machine that had been humming in her dreams since she was a kitten. She called it by a name she had never learned but always knew. "Stop him," the loom answered. The purple light vanished instantly, replaced by a blinding absolute gold. The force wave hitting Mason dissipated into harmless mist. Halvek staggered back, his interface cable sparking. "No, I am the administrator. I have the codes. Access denied." The voice of the loom was no longer mechanical. It was Astra's voice, magnified to the power of a deity. Designation interloper. Status rejected. Astra opened her eyes. They were pure white light. She floated a few inches off the ground. "You wanted to know the truth, Sarn," Astra said. Her voice echoed in Mason's bones. "Here is the truth. The 99.9%. It was never about romance." She gestured, and the strands of light wrapped around Halvek, lifting him into the air. "It was anchor compatibility," Astra stated, cold and final. The loom is a storm of infinite probability. It needs a consciousness to direct it that is me, and a reality to ground it that is him. I am the wind. He is the mountain. She looked down at Mason, and the light in her eyes softened, returning to gold. I am the interface, Astra whispered, the realization shattering her world. I was never just a matchmaker. I was the failsafe, and I was asleep until he walked in. Halvek struggled in the bands of light. This is impossible. I am a praetor. I demand you release me. You want to be part of history? Mason asked, wiping the blood from his face. He walked up to the floating trapped warlord. Fine. We will put you in history. Mason looked at Astra. Can you lock him? I can do better, Astra said. I can record him. She raised her hand. The loom descended. It didn't crush Halvek. It passed through him. We are not going to kill you, Astra said. We are going to etch your actions into the station's core memory. Every order you gave, every life you took, every lie you told. It will be broadcast on every frequency embedded in every transmission that leaves this hub. You will not be a martyr Sarn. You will be a living museum of your own guilt. No, Halvek screamed. Kill me, I demand you kill me. Denied, Mason said. The loom flashed once a brilliant camera shutter snap that illuminated the entire nebula outside. Halvek collapsed onto the walkway. The fight drained out of him. He was shivering, his uniform stripped of its grandeur. He wasn't dead, but he was finished. The data was already streaming out to the galaxy. The Alliance, the Council, the Resistance, everyone now had the undeniable, immutable truth of who he was. The golden light faded. The gravity settled. The hum of the loom returned to a sleepy, rhythmic purr. Astra swayed. The glow left her veins. She crumpled. Mason caught her before she hit the floor. She was light, so incredibly light. He sat down on the cold metal, holding her against his chest. She was breathing shallowly, her ears drooping. Hey, Mason whispered, brushing the hair from her face. Catgirl, stay with me. Astra blinked, one eye open. It was dim, exhausted. Did we win? We won, Mason said. Halvek is down. The station is stable. Astra closed her eyes again. I am a machine, Mason. I am just a component. That is why the number was high. It was not because I am charming. It was because I am a plug, and you are a socket. Her voice broke. It was programmed. Mason looked at the woman in his arms. He looked at the tail that was wrapped weakly around his wrist. He remembered the way she had looked at Juno. He remembered the coffee. Look at me, Mason ordered. Astra opened her eyes. The machine chose the compatibility, Mason said firmly. But the machine did not make you throw that crate. The machine did not make you stay when you could have run. And the machine sure as hell did not make you laugh at my terrible jokes. He held her gaze. You asked me earlier if I chose you, or if the system did. I am telling you now. I choose you, not the interface. You, Astra. Astra searched his face, looking for the lie. She found only the stubborn, weary honesty of a soldier who was done fighting. Okay, she whispered, a small smile touching her lips. I choose you too, even if you are a terrible date. The worst, Mason agreed. The sound of boots clanging on the walkway announced the arrival of Warden Brask and his team. They surrounded the defeated Halvek, securing him with restraints that looked reassuringly heavy. Brask walked over to Mason and Astra. He looked at the loom, then at the couple sitting on the floor. He didn't ask what had happened. He was a smart man. He knew when to file the report as equipment malfunction. Grant, Brask nodded. The child is secure. She is with Dr. Rook in the upper lobby. She is asking for you. Mason exhaled the last of the adrenaline leaving him. He felt every bruise, every burn, every year of his age. But he felt light. Can we walk? Brask asked. Mason looked at Astra. Can we? Astra pushed herself up using Mason as a crutch. She wobbled, then steadied herself. Her tail gave a defiant little flick. "We can walk," Astra said. "But we are taking the elevator. No more stairs." Epilogue. 3 hours later. The Free Nebula Cafe had reopened, though the yellow police tape was still crumpled in the corner trash bin. The smell of ozone had faded, replaced by the comforting, eternal scent of roasted beans. Mason sat at the same wobbly metal table. He was cleaned up, though the bandage on his neck was visible above his fresh shirt. Juno was sitting on his lap, fast asleep, clutching her stuffed bear with one hand, and Mason's thumb with the other. Astra sat across from him. She had showered her white hair fluffy and clean, though she looked tired. She was wearing a soft sweater that hid the fading glow marks on her arms. Kelp slid 3 mugs onto the table, 2 coffees, black and espresso, and a warm, frothy cocoa for the sleeping girl. "So," Kelp said, wiping his tentacles on his apron, "I hear the Praetor is currently being escorted to a maximum security black site, and the Council is drafting a new treaty based on the data you liberated." "Something like that," Mason said quietly, careful not to wake Juno. "And," Kelp continued, eyeing Astra, "rumor has it the Loom has gone into a rest cycle for the first time in centuries. The engineers are panicking. They say it is sleeping." "It is content," Astra said, wrapping her hands around her mug. "It got what it wanted." "And what was that?" Kelp asked. "A story," Astra said. "It was tired of math. It wanted a story." Kelp blinked all 6 eyes. "Right. Well, that will be 15 credits." Mason reached for his credit chip, but Kelp put a heavy tentacle on his hand. "However," Kelp said, his voice lowering, "since you saved the station and since you didn't destroy my espresso machine during the brawl today, is the family price." "Family price?" Mason asked. "Free," Kelp said. "But only if you promise to come back next week. I need the gossip." Kelp winked a terrifying gesture involving 3 eyelids and shuffled away. Mason looked at the coffee. Free coffee. He had finally gotten it. He looked at Astra. She was watching him over the rim of her cup. "So," Astra whispered. "Mission accomplished. Ledger closed. What now, Mason Grant?" Mason looked down at his sleeping daughter. He felt the steady rhythm of her breathing. He looked out the window at the stars, which no longer looked like coordinates for artillery strikes. They just looked like stars. "Now," Mason said, lifting his mug in a toast, "we figure out the other 0.1%. Astra smiled. It was the smile of a woman who knew the odds and didn't care. She clinked her tiny espresso cup against his mug. "Deal," she said. Deep beneath the floor plates in the silent, dreaming cathedral of the core, the Loom stirred one last time before entering its long hibernation. A final log entry scrolled across the darkened screens of the Accord pairing desk, unseen by anyone but the ghosts of the machine.